Hi, and welcome back to another installment of the Academic Senate President's Report. As I've been doing these on video, I'm trying to convey to you some of the key issues that are coming up, not just in Board of Trustees meetings, but also some of the Senate meetings and other governance groups, particularly if there's an interest that connects back with teaching and learning. There are a lot of things that happen on campus, and I know we're on a lot of committees, but we're not on every committee. So one of the ideas behind this is to give you a sense of what's happening and maybe for you to hone in on some key issues if something sparks your interest or you have a concern and we're still in that pipeline of decision making through our governance groups. You could email me and let me know, and I can try to address the issue. Keep in mind, what I'm trying to do here on YouTube is give you that scroll. If you go to the bottom of the report, I'm giving you the timeline, and the idea on that is you just click on the item and then that'll take you there to that section of the video, so you don't have to necessarily listen through the whole video. I realize some of these are quite long, but in some cases a lot of meetings pile up, and I try to do generally 2 or so board meetings and all the accompanying meetings that go with them in one of these video reports. In all cases, as I've said in all these videos, if you wish more information, most of the governance groups, because they're under the Brown Act, which is the open meetings law that requires groups to post their agendas 72 hours in advance and to give you all the minutes and information from those meetings, because of that, the good news is you can go online to Board Docs, you can find both the agendas, you can find minutes, and in some cases, in the case of the Board of Trustees meeting, there actually is an audio recording, so you can actually watch it, listen to it there, and then have a better sense of what was discussed. Okay, next let's take a look at some of the items that came up at the board meeting of March 26, 2019. One of the things to note about this meeting was that it was a joint meeting between the LTUSD, the Lake Tahoe Unified School District, and the LTCC board. And I'll show you some images here, but it was interesting to have a collaborative meeting, and the idea behind the meeting was to discuss a number of areas of interest that maybe both the districts share in common. There's just so much out there that obviously we can benefit from each other's participation, conversation, and so forth. So one of those issues was looking at some enrollment trends. And I think the information that's presented is very positive. And so this is just showing in terms of our feeder school that there's much progress in terms of Lake Tahoe Unified School District students coming from the high school to the college, and you could just see the trend is the percentage of students from the high school enrolling in LTCC is going up. And this is another graph that charts some of this. And so this is showing that how many students from the Unified School District from the high school attend LTCC, and then another California college, a California public four-year school, out of state, private, nonprofit, not enrolled. And so this here, one thing you might notice for 2018, so the trend from 2014, 32%, 34, 32, 2017, 35. 2018, it's at 29%, but the note here is that this is only based on the fall 2018 data, and once we have all the data, those trends will go up. So I think there's a lot of positive stuff on the horizon between the two districts in terms of collaboration. Dual credit, dual enrollment, of course, is one very important area in the future for us. The second issue is calendar alignment. And back in, I think it was my previous President's Report, I talked about this, and I was very specific about working on the Thanksgiving break and taking that entire week off. And we had that conversation. That is happening next year. Now, the other issue was trying to get the spring breaks aligned. At this point, that isn't happening, but I think it was the case that the district needed to have a conversation with the teachers in the Unified to make sure they would maybe be okay with this. So I think there's more on the horizon in terms of this issue, but right now I'm not sure that that will happen next year in terms of that spring break alignment. And then the other thing that was interesting that closed the joint meeting on the 26th was a conversation about teaching techniques. And so we did some small group work, and there was just a conversation about preparing students who go to the high school and then come to the college. What are some expectations they have in terms of instructional technology, in terms of teaching approaches, classroom discussions, all those sorts of issues. So I thought it was a very effective conversation at the end of the meeting. Now, after the meeting was over, the Unified Board left, and then it went into our typical LTCC Board of Trustees meeting. And so I'll just cover a few issues there. First off, President DeFranco mentioned the honor roll coming up, and of course that happened recently, about a week ago. Really good turnout. I think one of the things you're noticing with a lot of the things at the college is that in the past they weren't really events, a lot of these events, and now we're building out a little more, just a bigger deal in terms of just attendance and getting the publicity out. There was a nice catered meal by some of our culinary faculty and students. And then you typically note more attention to this on social media before and after the fact. So that's very positive to see. Also, the president talked about the CUNY grant. You recall that Christy, Jonathan, and Jeff all went to CUNY to visit, to focus on this Promise Scholars expanded second year grant. And I think it's going to be a great opportunity for us to develop some interesting programming, develop cohorts to work on a first year experience, and maybe do even some different things in terms of our meta majors and STEM efforts at the college. And then another note very briefly here is that the Classified Employees Union presented their sunshine list, and I heard at the last board meeting in April that they already have some negotiations scheduled with the district. So that's very positive to hear, because I know there was a bit of a concern about not having the sunshine list presented and adopted by the board this late in the year. Okay, so next let me give you some updates of the Board of Trustees meeting from April 9, 2019. I'm going to peek at my notes just here as a cheat sheet on some of these items. Again, go to the agenda if you want to get the more in-depth documents. There's usually, for any of these items I present, unless it's an employee introduction, there is quite a packet of like PDFs that have all the background information. That's much more than I can offer you. So first off, a welcome to Connie Summers. She's the new Board Governance and Policy Assistant. And she makes sure that all the agendas and governance group items are up to date and everything's processed correctly. And she works in the President's office outside there. You can see her next to Lisa. So welcome to her. There was a really good presentation by Heidi from the Tahoe Prosperity Center, and Frank Gerdman from Advance also joined in. And there's just a lot of interesting information that I think will probably come back to relative to guided pathways. I didn't realize that the Prosperity Center is doing so much that is valuable to us, not just even in educational senses, but in terms of social justice senses that we're probably concerned about. So things like careers, continuation of the Tahoe Career Connect, talking about careers and opportunities for earning a living wage in our community. A discussion of things like cameras and their use to detect fires, I thought was very interesting. So they actually work on creating opportunities to have cameras in the community, so if there is a forest fire, the awareness is more immediate, and they can the fire services can address those issues. Also a focus on cell phones and broadband to try to really get Lake Tahoe up to speed, so to speak, in terms of its technology, and make opportunities available for locals. The conversations about the economy and just how the economy has taken a bit of a downturn recently. The number that was quoted was 14% in terms of what's happened to the economy locally. There was also a discussion of housing, which continues to be really a key in terms of opportunities to have affordable housing. And I know that's always a conversation in terms of when are we going to get the real affordable housing, and not condos that cost $1 million, because those are not really good for a lot of our local economy. And relative to that, a conversation about the movement into the tourism sector. The number I have written down here is a movement from 42 to 62% of tourism jobs. And the conversation was that housing, if that takes up 50 or more % of one's income, what is a real living wage in terms of the basin, in terms of living Lake Tahoe and the surrounding areas? So I think it was just really cool to hear this, because I think those are those human and community components that make our jobs easier. If people can afford to live here, if they can afford food, if they can afford transportation, if they have good Wi-Fi access for online classes throughout the community, cell phone reception, etc., then it makes our lives a lot easier, because our students come to class, whether face-to-face, ISP, or virtually, better prepared and better able to have the resources, the basic human social justice resources available to them prior to even enrolling in our class. So that was really good to hear that from the Trial Prosperity Center. Dr. Risen gave an update on the ACCJC annual report, our accreditation report. And you're probably hearing a little bit about this in a variety of campus groups. It's come up in PAC, it's come up in, I think, Clemcy, and also in Academic Senate and the Board of Trustees meeting. The one interesting thing that came out in the meeting was that in this round, we're not getting a emphasis on having to report our SLO data. And so maybe it's the case that the commission has moved on a little bit in terms of the concern with SLOs. Although the interesting thing, according to Mark Williams, who is our SLO coordinator, is that from last quarter, I think we're in the high 90s, like 97% of faculty turning in the SLOs that were required in those various classes. So that's pretty good news there. And so I think we're moving along really nicely. The last ACCJC accreditation visit, we had an excellent report, and hopefully we continue that in the future. We'll talk about next the Academic Senate meeting from April 19th, 2019, some issues that came up. And I'll just put these all together here. The first of these is just a report that we're on track to open the theater with all the repairs because of the flooding and the winter issues May 1st. So that's really good news. And actually today, someone who's working in the theater stopped by my office and they saw my microwave and they said, "Hey, can I heat up my food in the microwave?" I said, "Yes, of course." And I said, "Oh, how's it going with the remodel?" And he said, "We're getting really close," and they're just doing like finishing work. So that's pretty exciting to hear May 1st. Bruce Armbrust brought forward a very good discussion about GE and the value of GE, and a conversation about if a student takes a class in high school and then has a GE breadth area requirement, is that the same sort of class that one would take in college? And I think mostly everybody there has said, no, it's not the same. There's a difference between collegiate instruction and K-12 instruction in terms of some of those GE areas. And I heard from quite a few faculty afterwards that they just really like the nuts and bolts kind of conversation we had about teaching and what happens in some of our GE areas. So hopefully we can program in more of those teaching and learning conversations in the future, because I think they're really valuable to have. And if we don't all meet at the same time, sometimes it's a good opportunity to do this in Senate or some of our other governance groups. Also, conversation about active assailant training. I think Al is going to be coming back to the faculty. I heard that the art department did an active assailant training within the parameters or scope of their areas. I think what's key about this is if you're teaching in a particular classroom, you want to know where are the exits. You want to know the points of entry. You want to know about the locks. You want to know about the emergency phone and so forth. And so I think the idea was that the art department wanted to do a training within that actual space, because if something happens, you need to know how to prepare for an emergency within that space, not necessarily a generic classroom. So I think it's a really good idea to make it more specific to your teaching or work area on campus. So just be on the lookout for that. I think more is coming. And then lastly was reported, it's not an academic and professional matter. I mean, sometimes you need a snack, but it doesn't really count. But vending machines, I guess there are some new vending machines on campus, and the word is that they're offering more healthy options. I didn't check out the vending machines yet, but I know those are in play. I saw there's one in the student center area by the cafeteria, and there's also one I saw outside the library. So maybe more of those are coming, and we'll have to see what they're offering in terms of healthy snacks and options for food, particularly if the bookstore is closed and students need something quick before or after their classes. Okay, so next let's focus on the Board of Trustees meeting from April 23rd, 2019. First off, it was exciting to hear Natalie Lehman getting the Classified Employees Excellence Award. So if you get a chance coming up in the next couple weeks, you go into instruction, thank Natalie for all the excellent, high-quality work that she does for instruction here at LTCC. So we wish her well in terms of winning that award. Also, there was a welcome to Naomi Follett, who is a new Director of Financial Aid. She comes with a really incredible background from her previous institutions, and I think it's an exciting time for the college because, as you know, there was a bit of a holding pattern for a while when we couldn't get that position filled on a permanent basis. So it's really exciting. And the board has been really good about welcoming new employees, and I think it's always a great moment to have this seen publicly at the Board of Trustees meetings when we have a new employee coming on board. So welcome to Naomi. Also wanted to mention that recently at the CC Pro conference, LTCC Marketing Department received second place for the Schedule Award. It was actually the fall schedule for 2018. This really great design, and I think it set a really high standard here, having this individual here overlooking the lake, and then this really cool graphic design. So great news. Congratulations to our marketing department for pulling that off, winning second place in terms of that award. It's very exciting. There was an update on Proposition 51 modernization funds, and this has been something the district has been trying to get negotiated down in Sacramento. An update on that, I'm not going to say too much about it, but we're still going to wait to see if these modernization funds are going to come through. And if you recall, this would allow moving the DRC downstairs and modernizing a lot of our labs, our science labs on campus and so forth. So I think we're still in a holding pattern on this. We'll have to wait and see this summer to see if we indeed get any of those funds. We will cross our fingers and hope that we do. Wanted to mention that Mark Williams gave an excellent PDL report. As you know, the faculty, after they complete their sabbatical, they come back and they present their report to the Board of Trustees, and so I'll show you some images here. The first set of images focus on his production, his starring as Jesus in Jesus Christ Superstar, and he mentioned that the role originally he played at the Pioneer Center back in 1994, so he did a bit of a comparative take on playing those roles separated by those years, and it was great just to see his overview of the production and the design of it, and he played some of the music and the video. And if you want, you can go again to the board report and you can click on the entire PowerPoint of any of these reports, and you can check out Mark's PDL, and there's a link to some videos of the production, so you could certainly check that out if you want to hear Mark's incredible singing here in that production. Second thing he focused on was working in some MOUs, changing the theater model. It's something we've been doing as an institution over the last few years, and trying to look at partnering with community theater organizations and sharing some of the costs and some of the production and so forth. There's been kind of a dramatic shift in just the productions and how we do things in the theater, and this is an opportunity to look at some of those future efforts coming down the pike in terms of opportunities for sharing with community groups in LTCC for some of those theater productions. Okay, this next item is the Vision for Success, and this is something that we have been involved in over the years through the Chancellor's Office. Donna Sohan, our Director of Institutional Research, presented this first, that I heard of it, on the April 23rd PAC meeting. I think it's getting through the board tonight as well, and we will definitely come back to this. So this is the project, and I'll have to put up on the screen here so you can see it a little bit better, by which we define our local goals, and then the conversation is how do these goals get acted on. If we set a local goal for increased completion for degrees or increased number of degrees, how does this get acted on externally in terms of funding, in terms of other concerns out there at the Chancellor's Office? As we move into a new student-centered funding formula, I think this will continue to be of significance, and I unfortunately can't answer that for you entirely today because I'm still learning about the consequences of this in the future. What Don has basically been working on with her team is for each of the goals. So goal 1 is completion, goal 2 is transfer, goal 3 unit accumulation, goal 4 workforce, and goal 5 is equity. And there is a 6th goal, but I don't think it has measurable outcomes associated with it. That's not in here. But in each of those 5 goals, there often is an option to pick a project and then to work on that project for our local goals. And I will say that This actually came up in a conversation today relative to the CTE DE Pathways grant I was talking about also in this report. So some of these metrics we're looking at may come up in multiple areas across campus as we're working towards some similar goals. So I won't go through this in detail, and I'll just say refer you to the backup data you can get online. But the conversation now with the governance groups is to figure out which of these goals to focus on, and then come up with a metric, with a number that will allow us to compare with a past date in time, which is 2016, 2017. And then in most cases we're talking about a number, an increase or a decrease, because if you know, the Chancellor's Office is trying to get the number of units that students take on their pathway towards a degree or certificate to, interestingly enough, drop. Back in the old days, in the late 90s when I came on board, we were the opposite. We had these big classes and we didn't have repeatability, and students were encouraged to take classes again and again and again, and in some cases we would see students graduate with 10 AA degrees from LTCC or 20 certificates. The movement through the legislature and the Chancellor's Office is the opposite now. So we're talking about decreasing numbers of units that students actually will have completed through their pathways. We're projecting a decrease here of, sorry, I have to look at this, 9% decrease is what we're looking at as a goal. All the other areas are typically an increase, and again, it's a numeric increase, and then there's a percentage, and it seems like the number we're targeting here, and this is in draft form, so this is not necessarily the gospel, but it's 20% in many of these areas. There is one I'm seeing 10%, but when it relates to increasing completion of certificates and degrees, I'm seeing here just the numbers 20%. Again, that could change. Now, one conversation that comes up with some of the goals about certificate and degree completion is, and this relates to financial aid as well, if a student completes a certificate, and if that's their goal and that's the terminal certificate or terminal goal they want to complete, if they then go on to the associate's degree, if it's available in that area, could they be dinged on financial aid? And the answer is possibly. And so that's still a conversation we're trying to have on campus, specifically with Jonathan King and his staff, to really get a sense of penalties for, say, auto awarding certificates or even degrees to some of our students on campus. So I feel like some of the local vision goals will be very relevant to what's going on with our conversations about, say, in Clemcy with our certificates and our pathways as we continue to have our all faculty days. And we talk about a student goal. What is that goal going to look like? Will it have a certificate? Will it have a nesting or stackable certificate? Will there be a transfer degree? Should we develop new transfer degrees? I know some folks in social sciences and also our natural sciences have been playing with the idea of developing an associate's degree in those areas. And so these are conversations I think we definitely need to have in terms of meeting student success and some of their goals relative to guided pathways in the future. So actually I was just playing my previous update on Vision for Success. Before this was considered in the board meeting, it had been considered in a number of different campus groups. And one thing I can say about this is just be on the lookout for more emails and information about how the process works and what's going to happen in terms of sharing some of those percentages and setting some goals as a college. The challenge that was noted by, I believe it was board member Carrie David, is that if some of the goals are focused on transfer goals from, say, our college to a UC or CSU, that's fine, but we also transfer to other institutions, notably, say, University of Nevada, Reno. So it's kind of interesting that given our uniqueness in terms of where we are right on the border of another state, it's pretty unique, and thus it's sometimes a challenge trying to use some of the metrics from the Chancellor's Office and make those meaningful for us, because our definition of community locally or virtually in terms of some of the things we do with other programs may not be the same for other schools in terms of interpreting and using the Chancellor's Office data. So I think more to come on the Vision for Success. And one of the last items from this Board of Trustees meeting that I thought was particularly great was the board's passage of Resolution 9 for 2018-19 as National Faculty Appreciation Week. And so you can see here the whereases talk a little bit about the numbers of full and part-time faculty. And then the additional whereases talk about the value that community college faculty play in general, And then the resolved here is that the board conveys its profound appreciation of the LTCC community to the Lake Tahoe Community College District full and part-time faculty for their dedication and commitment to the care of students, and proclaims the week of May 6th through May 10th, 2019 to be National Faculty Appreciation Week. So this was really cool, and I encourage you, if you'd like, to listen to the Board of Trustees and their comments. They had so many nice things to say about the faculty in passing the resolution, so certainly I thank them for this resolution that they passed. Okay, so the next section of the report here, these are the miscellaneous items that are out there that necessarily haven't come up in a meeting, but I think they're just pretty important to have on our calendars or on our minds in case we're affected by this. Flex proposals are due on May 1st. There was a message set out on April 23rd from Lori Thorne from Instruction, so just be sure to do those. They're much more consolidated than they used to be in the past. If you're new to LTCC as a faculty member, you may not know this, but in the old days they were much more extensive, and our association tried to work on making these as user-friendly as possible, which I think has become the theme with a lot of things on campus, including SLOs and curriculum, moving that direction with Elumen coming on board. I wanted to mention the Meta Majors icons, and for that I'll jump to the agenda item from the board. So you're seeing here the black and white version, and I'll blow this up a little bit so you can see it better. And one of the things that happened in this process, and the process goes back many months, there were quite a few of us. I was the faculty representative. Katie Bailey and Diane Lewis from marketing were on the team. Tara from University Center was there for not the meta majors, but relative to what we're rolling out with University Center and the hospitality program through Washington State. There was conversation about a lot of graphic projects, and we really wanted to capture in the faculty side of this with the meta majors all the diversity that goes into each of these meta majors. And one of the challenges with that graphically is that in some cases you have, like in arts, languages, and humanities, quite a few different disciplines, programs, degrees, certificates encapsulated within that. So it's sometimes hard to visually represent it. We went back and forth on the badges, and someone said it looked like Hogwarts a little bit, which I think is kind of a good thing for recognizability. One of the things we discovered in looking at other colleges, and I won't mention those out there, but there's some other community colleges in California that have meta major icons, but they're very clip arty or stock art type. And so it's like, you know, for their version of art, languages, and humanities, maybe it's people talking or a globe or a book or something like that. We wanted to have something that was unique, so it didn't look like clip art. It didn't look like, you know, a wingding or something like that, because it just doesn't really do anything for you visually. So a lot of conversation went into this. It looks, I think, really good in the end, but just so you know, there were meetings after meetings. There were emails that went through. We got down into, you know, whether or not to use an ampersand in the title. We got into how many words in the title. We also have vision statements, which are essentially what's going to be the external projection of the meta majors, which is more what students will see, and career partners in the region and so forth. And so we had a lot of conversation just about what needed to be communicated relative to encapsulating the diversity of the meta major, but also having something that was really recognizable and distinct. You'll notice for business, hospitality, and leadership, the leadership side there is a real nod to wilderness education. When Clinton came on board, he was tasked with taking that new direction, and one of those new directions was the leadership side of things, which I think is really brilliant in terms of marketing that. So you'll see a nod to that in that meta major. We did end up combining health and public safety. There just wasn't enough, there weren't enough programs in two of those as separate, so a decision was made to consolidate into one, thus giving us 5. And I know there was conversation about the, quote, STEM one. We don't really have the pathway, the pure pathway to engineering. We have some classes that certainly can prepare students for engineering, but we don't offer a whole set of, you know, engineering courses on campus. So conversation about STEM, the fact that people call it STEM versus something that's unique and that brings in, say, the environment in science and technology. Also, I know there was conversation in one of our faculty days among the math faculty about whether or not to have mathematics in the title as well. And so that's what is going out. It's being presented tonight at the April 23rd board meeting. You'll see it in the schedule. You'll see it represented, I assume, in the future in the college catalog as well. So I wanted to update you on this because it's been a real long process getting us here. Now, of course, the next step is talking about how do we do the real faculty related work. It's not just graphical stuff, right? It's like, what classes do we want? How are we going to design a first year experience? What sort of pathways are out there for students to be successful in 2 years and so forth. And that is the next side of this, as well as careers. And I think for the All Faculty Day coming up on May 10th, there'll be a pretty key focus on some of the career data and information relative to career success tied to the 5 meta majors. And I just mentioned it, just a reminder, the All Faculty Day, May 10th, 2019. And keep in mind for that day, the emphasis will be on continuing the efforts with guided pathways, and I have a sense that the focus will be on developing the career side. In a lot of our programs, maybe where we don't, and I shouldn't say we don't, that's not a good assumption, but maybe some of us don't think about the clear career pathways. Particularly in a discipline like, say, anthropology, someone will ask me, a student will ask me, what can I do with that degree given opportunities to maybe teach with a graduate degree in anthropology are somewhat limited. So we'll have more conversation about that during the All Faculty Day. FHP proposals. You received from John Kingsbury a call for proposals that went out. You received an email on that, and just to show you what that looks like, this is the request form. John sent this out on the 30th, and so you can check that out, and you can always just go into your search bar and find that. And it's pretty extensive, so if you're planning on doing a faculty hiring prioritization proposal, just make sure to get started early. It is due on May 2nd, and the key thing there is that you need your data back from the Office of Institutional Effectiveness. And John sent out on the email here that you contact them. Their email is effectiveness@ltcc.edu. If you start typing that in, it'll come up and it'll say Office of Institutional Effectiveness. And I was looking at that today actually, so you can do that. And then they'll send you back the data. That data specifically is all this stuff here that you fill in on the template. So it has FTS history and enrollment, FTF, full-time equivalent faculty, and so forth. And it has a really good opportunity here, I think, just to get that data from institutional effectiveness and plug it into your template here. And then what happens at the end of that process, just be sure to send that all to John Kingsbury to his email address, and then he'll start that process. One of the things to note is that if a lot of us are turning in FHP proposals this time around, there will be a lot of recusals. You obviously can't be on that committee that picks through the Senate and also have a stake in the game in terms of having a proposal from your area. So it's something to think about, and we may have a smaller subset of the Senate this year doing that just because of the number of FHP proposals out there. I've heard anywhere between 4 and 5 are in the hopper, so we'll have to see what we receive. Again, that's due on May 2nd, so just be sure. You can check with me or John Kingsbury if you have any questions about the process and how that works. I want to congratulate yet again Sean Ryland for achieving tenure. It's really a great accomplishment. And those of you that came to Sedalis, it was really cool to see everyone there and just to celebrate. We had over 30 people, I didn't count, but it was really full. We had that entire middle section. I'll have to put a picture up here. And it was just cool to see that. I was mentioning in a meeting today that back in the old days, the way we did it was there was a chocolate cake and sweet punch at like 8:30 in the morning in the old boardroom. I'm dating myself. This was ages ago, like in the 2000s. And I just think now we've kind of segued into meeting after work. It's a great opportunity for us to catch up with our colleagues and also to celebrate a great accomplishment. So I hope we'll continue that tradition into the future, celebrating the great accomplishments of our faculty as they achieve tenure. And you'll have to check with Sean to see some of the door prizes or gag gifts that he received as a result of getting tenure and some of the chemistry themed items. So you could check with him if you want to see some of those. SEM updates. So we have quite a few meetings coming up, virtual meetings, and I believe our 2 SEM team members, and this is, by the way, Strategic Enrollment Management if you're following along with the acronyms. And our two team coaches will be visiting campus and giving us some feedback. Moving towards the end here, I think you may have heard also we were selected as a model team or a model college for next year's proposal or next year's group to work on their SEM projects. It's a continuing project with new folks and new districts coming in next year, new colleges coming in. And so Dr. Riz and I will be presenting that information for the last day in which they convene the new groups coming in, new colleges presenting their information. So it's kind of exciting. I think we'll see this continue though. It's not really an endpoint for us. We've done some good work with what we call the Tahoe Clear project, but it continues into Pathways. It's clearly part of our mission to do more of this in the future relative to talking about the first, the second year class experience, what the schedule looks like, talk about maybe competition between multiple GE classes that fulfill the same GE breadth requirement and so forth. So more coming, not really an endpoint, but a continuation into the future. I want to also mention, been part of a conversation, quite a few meetings, virtual and in person, for a CTE DE Pathways grant. A couple of you on the DE task force faculty came to a meeting. We've had pretty wide participation. It's been very quick trying to get this grant finished. It's actually due the end of this week, the end of April 23rd on Friday. And so we're trying to get into the final phase of the grant. There's a lot of money out there, up to $500,000 available basically to design a pathway for some of our CTE programs that include a DE component. It would be trainings, it would be the development of a lot of career and web-based and social media-based resources that really target those CTE programs and have a very specific and intentional DE component to them. So I think it's pretty exciting if we get the grant. I know we've had quite a few grants. There was just a new one announced for early childhood education, $30,000, and there are more of those I think coming, and it's always a great opportunity when these grants are out there for us to apply and be competitive and maybe get some resources that hopefully are embedded in our programs, in our college services, such that we can continue them in the future even when the grant money dries out. You know, that's always a challenge with grants, is sometimes, like if it's personnel and you hire personnel for the term of the grant, it's not always the case, right, then that you can grandfather in those personnel. And I think that's a particular challenge of any of these grants, but I have to say leadership on campus has been very aware of this, and I think it's part of our conversation, I would say, when we have these meetings about the grants. So new opportunity there. I want to thank everyone just for serving on so many committees. It seems like every day I'm getting a new request from HR, and they're great at giving me those requests, and then I pass them on to you. And I realize we've had so many full-time faculty committee hires, the dean hire. I don't think we've had any director hire recently, but classified staff hires. And it takes a lot of our time. And I know we're a small faculty, and particularly when a lot of us are on leave, either for sabbatical or Willie Brown, the reduced teaching program, it's hard on the rest of us. So I want to really express thanks to all of you for serving, because I realize we're super busy with committees, we're busy with our work assignments, with teaching and so forth, and it's sometimes hard to fit in committees, and I don't take that for granted when I send out that message and I ask you, hey, would you be willing to volunteer for the latest committee hire that's coming up? And so there likely are more coming in spring quarter. We'll see how that goes. I'll keep you posted on those. And so just to mention a few other issues out there, I wanted to mention that Brian and Colleen, our wonderful art faculty, recently opened their own clay studio, Compass Clay Studio. I had a chance to attend the opening. I'll show you some images here. It's just really great to see this in our community. I thought there was a great turnout. There was a lot of buzz on social media. I thought the location of the studio, and I found out a little history from Brian, that originally this was owned by the Mason family, you know, Roberta Mason, and was an architectural studio. And you could tell, looking at the space, that it had just a real unique feel to it. And so it was great to see what they did with the new space to turn it into this incredible studio. They're doing classes. They're doing efforts with families and young kids and so forth. I think it's just really another sign of how Lake Tahoe is becoming more and more vibrant. And I think attracting businesses like this that are focused on community needs and the arts and so forth is exactly, in my personal opinion, where the South Shore needs to be going in terms of attracting people, because it just gives you a totally different appeal that I think you can only find if you have the arts represented in a community like ours. And so it was really exciting to see this opening. We wish Brian and Colleen future success with Compass Clay Studio and all of the efforts they'll be undertaking in the future. Also, there were quite a few faculty recently, Thursday and Friday Elumen Training, and I thought those went really well. We had 10 to 15 faculty and staff per meeting, and it was just great to see that on the horizon we're going to be really solidifying and simplifying actually our curriculum processes in terms of working with Elumen. So it was great to work with Megan, who trained us, I thought very effectively, took us through a lot of the approaches with Elumen, and I think it's going to make it a lot easier, not just for our SLO work, but for our curriculum work as well. I wanted to mention that our Incarcerated Students program, there's work with Shane on developing an advisory committee, and the advisory committee will function to deal with a lot of issues and have some conversations with ISP in terms of looking at timelines, in terms of providing feedback and instructor presence for our incarcerated students in the program. So more on the horizon about this, and I think you'll be getting some emails from Shane in the future if he's looking at maybe your participation on the ISP committee. And then another issue I wanted to address, earlier in the video I talked about committees and thanking people for serving on hiring committees. So I just thought maybe it'd be a good idea this year for us to have a conversation about committees. Your opinions on the committees, what have you thought about the match between your skill set and working in the committees? What have you thought about the meeting schedules, what the committees do in terms of their charge, how the business is conducted, and so forth. And I'm still trying to think about how we might structure this. One idea is to do a survey. If we do that, I want pretty good response from all of you on this, because if I do a survey and there's only a few people responding, it's just hard to get a sense of the pulse of all the faculty. So be on the lookout for this. I wanted to mention it now, but I think going into next year as we think about committee appointments, it'll be an opportunity for us to have a conversation about what is working best for us in terms of faculty participation on committees. So more to come on that topic. As always in these videos, if you have any questions about stuff that comes up, you can come to my office. I'm just outside of B103. I think this is officially B101A, I think is the designation, across from Reprographics. You can always come to my office, talk to me confidentially, ask me questions about the Academic Senate. It could also be a question. I had a faculty member recently saying, you know, could we get a little more information about certain committees and what they do? And so I thought that was maybe a good suggestion for next year, that we could program that into either convocation or a first Senate meeting where we go through the list of all the committees and we talk a little bit about their missions, their charges, how often they meet, what they do, and so forth. There is a committee list that all of you have, but that committee list doesn't necessarily detail what these committees actually do. And I think it might be useful, not just for our new faculty, but our faculty like myself who've been here maybe 10, 15, 20 years, who have experienced some of the massive change that's happened, I think, for the better on campus in terms of new committees and new governance groups and restructuring of how we do things. It definitely is a different place than I remember it back in 1998 when I first was hired on. So ask me any questions, please do. Send me an email, drop me a message, come into my office, and we can have a conversation about Senate or any other academic professional matters that might come into your purview in terms of questions or concerns you might have out there. So just let me know. I'll be happy to talk to you about it. So that's it for this Senate President's Report. Thanks for listening, and be sure to check back. I'll have more updates in the future about upcoming Board of Trustees and other campus governance meetings.